right. I think I've got my audio straightened out. Hello, and welcome to Plugin Along, a stream dedicated to LOTRO plugins. Last time on Plugin Along, we looked into why the Festival Buddy plugin wasn't picking up different client languages and how to protect a plugin against missing language strings by using a helper function instead of going straight to those language strings. Today we're actually going to switch back to the deed tracker plugin. A user reported an issue with the recent file format update, and they were kind enough to just send me their plugin data files so I could dig into it. And on first look, I spotted several issues, so I think we're just going to jump in and see what we can take care of. As always, feel free to jump into chat with your thoughts and questions. And we do have a couple of questions already in chat left over from Little Redhead's stream, so we'll be starting there. All right, let me move things around a little bit. Yeah, neat. Okay, so me and my goose are over here at Glen Helig in Swanfleet. Okay, Circumale is just trying Lord of the Rings Online out and is debating between various classes. Circumale, this character is a minstrel. That means my character is very good at healing and also quite fun to play as a damage class. But as much as I try, I am not really good at being a tank. So minstrels are just a lot of fun to go around screaming at your opponents and making them fall down, and highly recommended if you like that sort of thing. Sir Camille was asking about role-playing servers, and some people in chat are already answering that. Laurelyn is the one that I know a lot has a lot of role players on, but I think there's probably some role players on all. Lafarrell says, cool frying pan. I know, right? There's actually a couple different frying pans you can get. This one's the heavy-duty frying pan. I think I'm starting to miss my lightweight frying pan. One of the things you have access to, depending on your subscriber status, is a wardrobe. So if we come into frying pans, I was using... Oh, what was I using? What am I using? I am using the sturdy frying pan, but before I was using the heavy cast iron frying pan. I think I like that better. It's a little subtler. So I'm actually going to switch that back. And I'll just walk around with that in my hands here. That'll work pretty well. Sir Camille says, can I play music outside of combat? Yeah. Let me actually go ahead and turn my player music volume up because I'll need to be able to hear myself play. And let's make sure. Hopefully game audio is making its way to you. When you want to play in music mode, the very basics are you right-click your character portrait and you can say play music. Now you will need an instrument equipped. Right now I just have a drum equipped, which is suboptimal for playing melodies. It can work, but let's go ahead and grab a different instrument. Actually, do I have an instrument in my inventory? I might. That's a whistle, but it's not the right instrument. There we go. There's my clarinet. Okay. So, if you right-click, you'll go and select Play Music. You'll go into music mode. And at this point, you can manually play things. So right now, I'm just pressing the numerical keys. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And that works up to, let's see, 1 through 8. So that's a basic corresponding to the white keys on a piano, C to C kind of a scale. However, if you want to have your chromatics, if you want sharps and flats, you need, I believe, Shift. Nope, Shift jumps up an octave. Control makes it flat. And of course, if you want a sharp, that's just the flat of the next note up. And so I think it is possible to connect a full-fledged keyboard into your computer and map those keys from that keyboard into LOTRO, but I've seen some people do some amazing things just by mapping each octave into basically their QWERTY layout and being able to play notes there. But when you want to play something more complicated, or you want to play music but you don't want to be physically pressing the keys, you can also play back pre-recorded music that's been set up in a file called an ABC file, and it'll play that. So for instance, if I go into my Documents, Lord of the Rings Online, a music folder, there's a bunch of ABC files here. So if I want to go play a random one, let's see. Sure, we'll do Popcorn. If I type slash, oops, let's see. There we go. If I type /play, I can list a song file, play. So I can type play / tested / popcorn. And it goes ahead and plays that, but it doesn't double check that I've selected the right instrument for it to make it sound good, which I have not. So hopefully that comes through in the stream. There are plugins, little miniature programs that you can run within the game that help out with all of this. Songbook is a well-known example for making the playing of music, especially in a group, better. Because if you have multiple people in a fellowship, they can synchronize their playing through the game. The game supports multiple people's parts being played in a way that causes them to play basically in sync. And so that's a very nice thing, and servers like Laurelin have an active music community that takes advantage of that. Okay, well, I'm going to put my drum back on because that's a better instrument for attacking things. Okay, so yes, you can play music within the game, you can do it manually, you can play pre-done music through files, and you can synchronize music playing across a fellowship or possibly even a raid. Alright. Plugins. Plugins can be accessed through the System Plugin Manager menu, and you can find a whole bunch of them online using the LOTRO interface website. Let me pull this over. So if you go to lotrointerface.com, you're going to find a website at which you can download plugins. If you feel uncomfortable or not sure about installing these plugins manually, you can also, and there is a link here in chat, go to the LOTRO Plugin Compendium. Here it is, item number 663. And this is a standalone downloadable program that will download plugins and put them in the right place and make sure they're set up correctly for you. So you don't have to do any of that yourself. Otherwise, you can just go to a plugin. Let's say we wanted to install Titan Bar. When in doubt, if there's a bunch of them, you might just sort by the date. So we can see the most recent one was Titan Bar here by Duriel. Great. We can download it. And we can also check the installation steps if there are any. Looks like nothing. So we download, we get a zip file, we extract that zip file. Excellent. We get a folder called Havna Plugins, and this is what we want to copy into our plugins folder. Documents, Lord of the Rings Online, plugins, and paste that in. That's a lot. So instead of that, what I recommend is getting the LOTRO Plugin Compendium. Let me load it up here. Let me load the correct thing. And this is the LOTRO Plugin Compendium. So if we add a new plugin, Titan Bar, LOTRO Plugin Compendium knows which kind of vets the plugins, and so it's only listing the one that matters. I select that, I select add, and it's done. So LOTRO Plugin Compendium is a much nicer way to do that, but it's all doable manually if for whatever reason you don't want to use the LOTRO Plugin Compendium. Whenever you add or move a plugin while your game is running, do make sure to click this green arrow. That will refresh the list. LOTRO is not keeping an eye on your plugins directory, but if you click this green arrow, it'll refresh the list, and now we can see Titan Bar is here. So now I can load Titan Bar, and I can start using it. Okay, now we're not planning on doing much with Titan Bar today, so I'm going to blow that away, refresh, and now it's not there anymore. Today we're going to be focusing on Deed Tracker, a plugin that I wrote, heavily based off of the Hidbold plugin by, I want to say Galahad, and we're going to be working on that. So let's go ahead and close those. Okay, anything else in chat? Okay, other people commenting about Laurelyn's music scene and being willing to share how to do stuff in game. Awesome, that was a whirlwind right there. Little Redhead is commenting on which brand of elves they like. Awesome. Lotharo asks if there's a two-handed weapon class for dwarves. I think dwarves can play most classes, so things like Guardians, if you're in, especially in your damage mode, you have access to two-handed weapons there. But I suspect any of the other melee classes like Champion or Captain, well, maybe not Captain, but when in doubt, I like to go to the wiki. So if you haven't seen it yet, it is lotrowiki.com. And Little Redhead has already pulled that up right there. So you can go to class and you can start looking at some comparisons between them. So there's a view of class roles here. There's a mapping of who can do what. And two-handed. I don't see anything about two-handed weapons there. Oh, advertisement, that's sad. Two-handed weapon. Okay, the LOTRO wiki isn't always great. Sometimes I'll just pop out to a web search like a Google search to find specific things if I'm looking for them. But yeah, clicking through to specific classes, if I click through to Guardian, for details see Guardian, great. And we can see they have two-handed axes, clubs, hammers, and swords. If I click through to one of these, it's quite possible it'll tell me who can use these. So if I come on through and click two-handed axes, is that all of them? Yeah. So two-handed axes, Bjorning, Captain, Champion, Guardian, cool. Two-handed clubs, Bjorning, Captain, and Guardian. Two-handed hammers, Captain, and Guardian. Two-handed swords, Captain, Guardian, Champion. So then we can take those and say, okay, which one of those can be dwarves? And boom, you've got your linking. Arthur is already putting it into chat. I think the answer, Champion, Guardian, Captain, and Bjorning can all use two-handeds, but there's some restrictions on specific types. No two-handed swords on Bjornings, for instance. Perfect. That aligns exactly with what we were seeing here. Okay. Fantastic. More comments in chat about two-handed wielders. Excellent. Okay, so we are looking at an update to my source control system. Fantastic. Okay, we are looking at a problem, and this was posted over on LOTRO interface. Let's pull this up and go on over to Deed Tracker. Deed Tracker plugin tracks your deeds. It's pretty straightforward. And someone kindly said, well, someone was recording a different issue, and they said, first off, great mod. Since the last update, I'm getting the above error and the mod doesn't load. I've tried uninstalling and reinstalling to no avail. Any help appreciated, thanks. could not find corresponding quest ID for deed ID 5. So this is important because one thing they tried, uninstalling and reinstalling the plugin. As plugin developers, we need to have firm in our mind that in Lord of the Rings Online, there are two locations. There's the plugin data folder, and then there's the plugins folder. And if there is a problem with the physical files of your plugin itself, something went wrong, there's code missing, there's code corrupted, you went in and you typed something to try something out and it broke everything, these are going to be found in the plugins directory. That's where the code itself sits. And sometimes deleting or uninstalling and reinstalling a plugin can fix this if that's what was happening. If you were going in and mucking with a file, but more often a plugin is not working or does not load because of an issue in the plugin data, where one of the save files, one of the pieces of information it saved, is causing a problem when it tries to load it in. Maybe the data is missing. Maybe it was saved in a different format than it's expecting. This can happen when you're switching languages from English to French or German, depending on whether you were using the 32-bit or the 64-bit client. At one point, that made a difference for changing between English and French and German. And so you get numbers that were serialized, saved out to the file. If it's a decimal number, it would be saved out as 3,0000 instead of a 3 decimal or period 000, because they're just using a different radix character, a radix point, and that's great until you try to load that file back in, and 3,0 is a tuple. It's two things, the number 3 and the number 0, and that's not valid in that location. So bad data can be a cause of a plugin not working. Something wrong with the plugin itself can be a problem, but unless you were in there editing the files, changing things, trying stuff out, deleting files randomly, it's probably not the plugin itself. So knowing that the plugin and the data are stored separately, we can know that as a diagnostic tool, uninstalling and reinstalling your plugins are probably not going to fix the problem. If the problem's in the plugin data, it definitely can't fix it because that's stored separately. So that's the first thing is as I think of. I've tried uninstalling and reinstalling to no avail. Well, knowing how those files are stored in two separate locations, we now know why that didn't work, because they didn't have a code problem, they have a data problem. The bad data was created by the code, but it's going to keep on happening even if they reinstall. So we have an error message that we can use to start. And I'm going to pop up. I'm using Visual Studio Code, which is a free tool you can download. And I'm using a Lua extension to add IntelliSense, syntax highlighting, and the like. And also the LOTRO API, probably needs updating, but I'm behind. The LOTRO API extension as well, which adds IntelliSense for the LOTRO specific things. And we're going to come on in here to, oh, that's not where I meant to be, and do a search for could not find corresponding quest ID. And we're going to cut off the specific one, and that gives us a single entry in the code. This is where we are seeing, or where they were seeing a problem. So, okay, we can see this is just an information issue, but it's since they were saying the plugin doesn't load, there's probably something else going on. In fact, it might be nice to know why we could not find corresponding quest ID for deed ID, blah, blah, blah. Stein says, good evening. Hello there. It feels like it's been a while since we have seen you. Hello and welcome. Okay, so we found the error message that they were seeing, but we can see it's marked as an info message. And so internally, we have two different functions, debug and info. An info message is going to get printed out to the user, but it's in a nice, friendly green text. Debug messages only get shown to the user if they have selected this turn on verbose logging, which is useful for testing. We should probably do that ourselves. So it says, I'm very happy to see someone stream coding, keep it up. Awesome. Well, happy to stream it and happy for people to find it either informative or bewildering, whatever the case may be. Um, and hopefully going to fix a problem for one of the deed tracker users while we're at it. That's even better. Okay, so we have their error message, and we found it in the code. Okay, it's not an error message, but they're also not loading. So we have their files. Let's take a look at that. So what I have done is I took their files and I went ahead and anonymized them. So what I did was any place their character name existed, I just replaced it, and we'll see that to start with the core plugin data file. So instead of all of their character names, I've just gone ahead and replaced them char 1, char 2, char 3, char 4, all the way down. Let's see, I'm going to go ahead and unload dtracker here. Now, we've gone ahead and logged in with our character Affodil, so Affodil is going to get added into this list as well. But hopefully I'm not spoiling anyone's character list that way. And what we can see is a side effect of a code change I made recently, which was let's add a timestamp to the backup file name because otherwise you just overwrite a backup file with another backup file, and that might not be great. So we have a bunch of backup files here, and the reality is the code that upgrades file formats isn't great. It assumes that all the files are on a specific format, in this case 3.1, and if this file is updated from, say, 3 to 3.1, it assumes all of the other files have been successfully updated as well, which we have seen over and over isn't always correct. So what I would like to do is take advantage of the fact that recently I started storing the version in the character files as well. So if we come look at character 1's plugin data, there is a... All right, we're going to shrink some stuff down here. There is not a version flag here, but there should be. That's very interesting that there isn't. Have to think about that. And so what I would like to do is each file itself has a version, and we can key off of that. Stein says, are they running an old version of the app? They were, and so this is a thing that has hit the dtracker plugin is that I've needed to change or wanted to change how things were stored in the file. And so that's always a nail-biting situation because when you are changing how things are stored, you have to write code that takes the old style and converts it to the new style in some way. So either you're reading the old style in, and then just you always save on the newest style, so it doesn't matter, or you read it in, convert it, save it out, and then you're ready to go. Something. You need some way to update from the old way of doing things to the new way of doing things, but you need to know which old one it was. If someone logs in with a version 2 file, we want it to be able to work. So we need to be able to upgrade that version 2 file to a version 3 file, and then a version 3.1 file. And so, Sir Kamal says, any list of plugins to help new players. I'm going to start by typing in the plugins command here. And these are some plugins that are used by various streamers here at the LOTRO Stream channel. For instance, Buff Bars, dtracker, Kiki Inventory, and more. And I apologize if I'm pronouncing it incorrectly. Let me know if I should be saying Steen or Stein or whatnot. There's a Dutch singer whose moniker is Steen, or it's spelled S10, and that's in my head because we've got Eurovision here recently, and so I see it and I just think Steen, but yeah, feel free to correct me if and when I get it wrong. All right. You have a double E there, and in Dutch that's an A sound, stain. But if it's Stina, we'll see. It's a problem when you only see things written. Okay, so yeah, it was meant for English pronunciation. Great, Stina, it is. I think. Let me know. So that leapfrogging thing of we don't know what version file is coming in because I'm a bad planner. And for a while I've had here's what version I think all the files are in the core file. But for whatever reason, I just never made that step to every file should have its own version. And then when we read in that version, we know we have to convert it like that. So let's take a look at, first of all, we have these backups, and these backups are essentially all the same. And I can double check that by coming on in and just doing a file comparison. And what we get is they are binary same. They have all the same contents. And if that's the case, then I can go ahead and delete all but the most recent of them, which is, yeah, that one. These are being made every time they were logging in because the update hadn't finished, and so the update tried to go again, and yeah, problems. And look, we can do that again with some of these other characters. Some of these characters had much more progress than others. We're going to see as we get down there, some of them didn't get processed at all. That's a good sign that something in there is not working, or was not working for our audience. All right, so I'm using a tool called Beyond Compare. I highly recommend it. Man, I wish I could get sponsored by them. But I highly recommend it. It's a great utility that just is fantastic at comparing files. And whenever you need to compare two files, it's very good at knowing about a bunch of different file formats. And so in this case, it can recognize they're just text files, so it's just doing a textual comparison. But it can do things like PDFs and Word documents to some extent. Okay, and now our folder looks a lot more sensible here. Great. I got some Titan bar files. I'm going to delete those. I just want to be dealing with dtracker files here. Oh, okay. Stina says, a tip for you is go to Google Translate, type my name in, put it in Norwegian, and hear it said aloud. All right, I'm game. All right. Detect language? No, it's Norwegian. Stina, fantastic. That's an excellent tip. Okay, so one of the things I think is interesting is we have been able to load these files in. So whatever's going on here, either it's running into a bug that has already been fixed on my end, or something. But what we also have is we have a bunch of backup files that were created recently. Okay, so let's roll back what we've done here a little bit, and I'm going to go ahead and make sure we're unloaded because that's going to write to the files that we're talking about. I'm going to delete everything there, but I've got it all backed up. Here are the files as was sent to me and anonymized. And so what I want to do is anything that says import backup, that's a backup before we import from LOTRO Plugin Compendium. I'm not worried about it. If we were doing that, things were probably working. I'm not worried about that right now. And I don't mind deleting things because, again, I have a snapshot of what did these look like when I first started mucking with them. Anything that says version 2 backup, I don't think is a problem because we're already into version 3. But we can see down here, this plugin data here is not looking so good. The new version should, the version 3 should be about 1/10 of that size. That was one of the reasons to do that. So let's pull this open and take a deeper look. And we can see, and this is one of the things that got my attention, is there is a mix up here. There is both the new style that just has a deed ID when it was completed and the method it was completed. Awesome. And then we have some of the old style, which are stored in a hierarchical method according to the visual layout in the game, which was great until they started doing things like inserting the swan feet and Cardinal tab in the middle of things, which I was not anticipating when I was dealing with this. So we can see we've got some old and some new, and that's not good. But I am noticing a bunch of the old ones are empty entries. So we can see there's a bunch of when equals blank, method equals blank, complete equals false. So real question is there anything here? Is it just, was it filled in but shouldn't have been? So if we collapse that one, we can see a bunch of other things. Now, it could be that this character just hasn't had a lot of play, but that right there is interesting to me. So the real question is there a complete equals true? Can't do that the way I wanted to. We're going to turn off the regular expression search. Complete equals, well, complete equals. I am hitting the wrong key and causing it to have problems. That's what it was. Okay, so we can see, yes, even in this old system, we do see some records being made. That's not good, because that shows to us that something weird has happened. Okay, bunch of trues. In fact, if I were to go ahead and say select all of the complete trues, there's 106 completed deeds in this old-fashioned way, as opposed to if we look at the new way, there are 15. So this is predominantly an old one with just a couple new ones. This can't work. This shouldn't work. I'm not sure what's going on here. So obviously, we have an issue where stuff is slipping through. And this is, let's see, do I have a version flag? Search for version. Why can't I see my search? There it is. Search for version. No, we don't have a version flag. And yet, we can see vocation is on the outside. This is, to me, bonkers in a way. Now, the good news is only one person has had this problem, but the fact that they can have this problem has me concerned. So that's what we're at. Let's start having let's start typing some ideas. So save issue from could not find corresponding quest ID. Some plugin, some save files have a mix of old and new deeds. Style. Okay, so we have that. One thing I think I noticed in one of the files was the way the quests were stored wasn't updated. So we're gonna go take a look at that. One of the things I wanted to look at was these version 2 backups. What are we in? We're in car 5. So let's do a comparison between the backup and that plugin data. Okay. That's not as informative as I was helping, but we can see from the file side. One of the problems with Lua save files is that when you're dumping a table to file, there's no canonical order that they will follow. They're just written out basically however they are in memory. You're iterating through what's probably a heap, and it iterates in whatever order it does. And so it can be very annoying to do comparisons of files. It can actually be easier if you're consistently comparing files like this to just write up a program in something like C# that loads them both into memory and then traverses both of them in memory to compare. It can actually be easier to do that than to try to compare them by hand. Something I'm interested in, though, is was there something wrong with the version 2 files? And to look at that, I'm going to delete some of these excess backup files here, first of all. Trying very hard not to accidentally double click and try to open them all. Okay, and we have a plugin file that says it's version 3. So the first thing I want to do is go ahead and say, I want that to be version 2. And why did I just close that tab? I'm going to need it. That's okay. Got another one. I want that to be version 2, and then what I want to do is go ahead and just delete the other files for that character. I want to see if a version 2 and update can work with these files, or if there's something else going on. And before I actually start that, because I don't want to duplicate all this work, I'm going to go ahead and copy this all off. So what I'm doing is deleting the current file and renaming the version 2 backup to just be the current file's name, sort of setting these all back to the way they were back for version 2. It's been suggested to me that I should have some more automated process for this, and I think that's true. I just keep hoping it's not necessary, and yeah, here we are. So a tool that just says, hey, roll this back to a certain version. Yeah, I know. No. Go away. Yeah, having a tool that can go ahead and roll this forward and backwards to different versions, I think is a good idea, but those things don't write themselves, so it just hasn't happened yet. Okay, so this is the version 2 version of this. So I'm going to go ahead and save this off somewhere. All right, copy. Great. So that's really easy to replicate now. And we're going to go ahead and come back into the game and just load and see what happens. Now I'm just going to be thinking about that for a minute as it churns through all these files. Okay, so where are we? We just went through an upgrade process, and we can scroll up here. So we're loading it in. This was this one. So deed tracker, upgrading save file format from 2 to 3, processing that for character 1. Great. Looks like I've got some extra logging here that I forgot to get rid of. So let's see, save key. Fantastic. I was trying to fix an issue, and I forgot to get rid of that. In fact, I'm concerned that it may clog things up a little bit here, so I'm going to come in and just reset this. And again, I'm just copy pasting this from a different directory, so it's super easy to just roll it back. All right, we're at 56 here. That's much easier. Okay, so we can see upgrading save file format version 2 to 3 for char 1 through 11. and we can see that we should have 14 of those. So if the text starts changing after 11 of them, then we're doing something special. So we can see we're doing some replacement. This is part of the version 2 to version 3 was paying attention to that there's 2 deeds for each mount, mount deed. And so if I come on into the class race epic, race and social, treasure mounts, there's a deed for mount the treasure-laden goat, mount the treasure-laden pony, and the cave claw masked pony, but there's a corresponding one named the same thing, treasure mounts, where you're mounting the goat, the horse, and the horse. And that's for the large folk, and the treasure mounts small version is for the small folk. But it's looking at that because in the version 1 of this, and even the version 2 of the save file format, it only recognized that there was one of those 2 versions of that deed. So here we're updating that. All right, processing for 12, 13, 14, based off of, oh, you didn't actually get the right one by chance. Cool, and right beforehand. So then we are upgrading save file format from 3 to 3.1, and we can see could not find corresponding quest ID for deed ID 6, and 5, and 5, and 5, and 7, and 5, and 7, and 5. Ironically, it's actually loading fine, so whatever was causing it to not load, I think the user was not seeing that for all of this could not find corresponding quest ID. So let's go ahead and figure out what is up with the quest IDs. And for our notes, it would be nice to know which of these files was... Oh, wrong key, sorry. Which of these files was doing that. So we're going to... let's log this off. Could not find corresponding quest ID for deed ID. We have 5 and 6. So that is car 3. 6 is car 1. All right, a 6 goes to 5. That's not the right one. Great. And so on. That might be enough to figure this out, but just for completeness sakes. 10 is in the 5. Okay. 11 is in the 7, of all things. Um, 12 is 5. Awesome. 14 is 5 and 7. All right, so we can start digging into what's going on here. So, why do I have so many tabs open? I'm going to go ahead and close a few of these Sublime text files. There we go. Okay, so what I want to do is look into some of these. So we can see the first one, character 1, had deed ID, well, quest ID deed ID 6. So we're going to dig into that a little bit. So the first thing is we have the version 2 backup. And what we want to find is that quest section. Okay, so we can see we have the old style of filing this, which was which deed had a completed corresponding quest. And in this case, we're marking deed tracked by page and tab and index number. The corresponding quest is complete. This was the wrong way to store things for a couple of reasons. So that was an update in, I want to say, 3, maybe 3.1. So let's look at the 3 backup. We can see this quest 6, 10, 8 still here. And in here, the 3.1, let's come take a look. Quests. We have an update. Well, that's exciting. So, what is 6, 10, 8? Indeed. Let's dig into that a little bit. So, in the prior save formats, we have our conflicting quest IDs. And So what we expected to see, that this in the 3.0 update should have updated the page tab index into a deed ID. And that didn't happen. So there was obviously an error somewhere with that. And then the conflicting quest deed ID to quest lookup said, hey, I don't see a 6 here. Fair enough. And so that didn't work. So in this, could not find corresponding quest ID, we're in the wrong place. That should have been higher up. And you know what would be really great is a block paragraph comment describing what changed in that version. Here, let's make a note here. Add block comments before each file format update, a block describing what we think changed. Because that would be great to know where we're looking for this. But in the version 2 to version 3, if we search for quests, actually, update quest format. Okay, so we're updating quest format here. Where are we? We are in the version 2 to version 3. Yes, that's what I was hoping for. But we did not see that in the version 3 backup. So something didn't go right. Okay, so we have the quests here. Awesome. This is what we needed to see cleared. And we're able to replicate it here, which is great. So one thing we can do is we can make sort of a minimally complete sample to replicate this. So let's see, minimal for quests. And for that, we only need character 1. And for that, we only need the quests section. Conveniently, that's at the top. So for the deeds, I'd like to say we don't need it at all, but that could cause problems. So we're going to leave it, and in the core file, we're just going to leave char1, and we're good. So we can replicate this, I hope, with just 2 files. And that's going to narrow the scope of our inquiry. However, I foolishly did not unload the plugin, and it's going to have something to say there. All right. So we have char char1, great. Let's load that dtracker. And that's going to take much less time to load because it's only got 1 file to update. We're still going to see they could not find a corresponding quest ID for deed ID 6. Perfect. And we're going to unload to make sure all of those get flushed out. Remember, when your plugin says to write something, if you're not in the middle of startup or shutdown, there's going to be a 5 to 10 second delay before that file hits the file system. And so unloading the plugin can be a way to force that to happen. So if your plugin already has an unload, like a reloader capability, that can be a thing that you can do. If you don't need to worry about what's going to happen when my plugin unloads and reloads, if you're looking for a file to write out right now, reload your plugin, unload it, reload it. That will force the file to be written to disk. I shouldn't say force, but it does result in Lord of the Rings Online choosing to write that file immediately to disk. Okay. So we can see we have that replication. Version 2, we've got the quests here. Fantastic. Version 3, we're still seeing deeds getting written out. What is going on here? wonder if there's a fundamental problem with what we've been doing. Which is, we say, please write out this thing, but then we don't pause to let it be written out. And then we might still keep modifying it. I need to write that idea down. Is it safe to modify a thing we asked, a table we asked to write out to file between when we asked it and when it finishes? Because if not, that's going to be a problem. Okay. However, we can see the quests here is unconverted, but we can also see the deeds here is unconverted. And that's one of the things that makes me pause. So let's come look at what's going on. Because something I didn't take into account was this serial upgrading. Are we loading files that haven't been written yet? Okay, so in the version 2 to version 3, we do call load character data, and that's a problem. What we should really do is say, is the character already in memory? Because if it is already in memory, then we can use it there. Yeah, I think this would never work correctly for a multiple version update. I think that is the problem. If car data, where is this going to be? Car name. So if it's not loaded, then load the character data, or try to anyway. Oh my goodness, I'm doing braces. Sorry, my mind's in the C# world. Okay, if not character data, then load character data. Because if we've already got it loaded, then A, loading it again doesn't make sense, and B, we just saved out a file that's not there yet, which won't work. So let's go ahead and make sure we're unloaded, and let's go ahead and see if this one weird trick was enough to stop breaking things. So I'm going to go ahead and load that in and unload. And we're going to come back with, I know it deleted, that's why I'm trying to close it. We're going to go ahead and load these back in. So now we've got a version 2 backup. Awesome. We still see the deeds the way we expected them to, because this should just be a backup. Let's take a look at the version 3 backup. Okay. That was not sufficient to fix this. That's okay. And yet, completed is not there. That actually looks good. Oh, we're looking for complete. Complete. Okay. Interesting. I'm just going to scroll on down here. And did we see anything? Loading. Let's go ahead and see if there were any warning symbols here. Also, where am I storing that? Options. Okay, verbose logging is on. Okay, so upgrading save file format from 2 to 3, from 3 to 1. We still have the corresponding quest ID for deed ID 6. That's still concerning. So let's, I know it's deleted. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and check my assumption that that backup is a good backup. It is, okay, the quest erase class uncleared is up here. We have an ordering issue, quest race class uncleared there. Here, let's swap that. So now we also have a quest race class uncleared, and there's now a character version. That's not good. Why is that character version there? Hey, Ironbard. Yes, I agree. This is comical. Yeah. Okay, so where are we setting that version, and why are we setting it too early? Oh, Aaron Bard may be smiling at Little Redhead's comment. But yes, either way, hilarity. Get out of version. Okay, what's going on with that? All right, yes, it was Little Redhead. Okay, let's take a look at this. Okay. Oh, this is after load character data. Ah, that was a terrible place to put that. Okay, the problem is that load data is being used in multiple places. It's being used normally, but it's also being used during that update function. And so what we really want is for the update data function to go ahead and do this. Same idea. So if the version isn't in the character data, add it in. And so here's where we want to iterate through each of the care data for each character name. And how do we do that? Iteration code is something that I feel like I should always know how to do, and I do have problems with it. But in our save file update, we're doing this all the time. So let's see, is that how we're doing it all over? Load character data for all known characters. Where is this? This is load data. Oh, that would actually be a fine place for it, except I don't want to do it there. Okay, so we're iterating through the list of characters. That's in that main file. This one right here. And for each one, we're going to go ahead and use the name and check in the array under that character's name if there's a character version. So and that would fill it in here. Let's give that a try. So we're going to go ahead and unload those files. Going to go ahead and close them here, delete them, go ahead and copy them back in, and reload. Fantastic. Problems. You know, syntax errors I can fix. Logical errors are the ones that are terrible. Attempt to index a field of a nil value. I guess I should check this for being valid. Okay. Fantastic. So, what do we have here? We still see it could not find a corresponding quest, but what I'm really interested in is that version doesn't leak in. So that version 2 backup, version is no longer there, awesome. Version 3 backup, version, and then this one, version. It does have a version. It only has a version of 3.1, which is concerning. But it does have it. And that's actually pretty reasonable if it's because this code is only stamping it if it doesn't already have one, under the theory that it should already be updated if it does have one. So let's look for that. Okay, so we're in the 3.1. We should be. Are we seeing that we're upgrading from 3 to 3.1? We are. But where do we force this to get saved? Because that's the thing that is true, is the current architecture only saves the character data for the current character. So how is this making sure that gets saved out? And if it's not, why not? There we go, patch data save. Oh no. So after the version, we need a save. Do we have it? We do not have it. Should we have it? We should have it. Okay, so set the file name to get character data for character name, patch data save it, server file name, and character name. Yeah, that's gonna make a difference. Let's go ahead and, okay, we are unloaded. Let's go ahead and delete those files, restore them. And I'm just copy pasting from a window that's off screen because there's already too many windows on the screen. Let's go ahead and load this. Now we're still seeing that could not find corresponding quest, but we're making progress. Like every one of these is an error. So let's go ahead and unload that. Stop it. Stop it. Okay, so same thing. I'm looking for version. In the 3, I'm looking for version. In the... Okay. Now we can see the deeds still aren't getting updated. So something else is still wrong. That's okay. We're in this for the long haul, as it were. But why? Why are the deeds not getting updated? I'm still concerned that there's a race condition here. Also, yes, we're still doing a load character data here where we shouldn't be. Yes. Okay, so in the version 2 to 3, we check load character data. In the version 3 to 3.1, we need to. Why did I just hear a horse? Maybe that's the sound of a goose. I don't know. Sounded suspiciously like a horse. Okay, so we now have another check to make sure we're not trying to load from a file that hasn't been saved yet. Little redhead goose looks around innocently. I mean, what do I know about Middle Earth? Maybe this thing makes a horse sound. But I doubt it. I'm keeping an eye on you. Fantastic. It's keeping an eye on me too. All right, we're gonna go ahead and come into the G tracker. We're gonna load. Okay, upgrading save file format from 2 to 3, processing. From 3 to 3.1, processing. Replacing deed ID with quest ID. Hey, look, it works now. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and unload. I'm not making noises because I'm frustrated at finding the answer. The answer is great. I'm making noises of frustration that I did this in the first place, even though I know in this head that when you request a file to be saved, it doesn't go out right away. So we cannot try to load it. And even if we did, what would be the point? We already have it in memory, if we have it in memory. But the problem is, the happy path for me is incremental updates. Oh, of course, there's a new update. You load it, you run it, you only ever run through one of these code paths, so it just doesn't matter. Though the problem of not persisting out that file for other characters, that's a problem in and of itself. So yeah, making sounds of frustration because why would I have written it this way? But I feel that way about many things. So we have the version 2 backup. We have quests and deeds in the old style. Great. Let's look at the 3 backup. It's already looking better. We have a quest updated. We have all of our deeds nicely updated. Love it. That's what I wanted to see. One of the reasons I wanted to have this flat file structure where it's just DID, whatever, is that while this is not very readable, it is more readable than it was before. And we could always add in some debug information that includes the name of the deed that we're talking about. But since the deed names would be kind of long, that would add a lot to the file content. I would only do that for debug purposes, but yeah, just this feels better. Okay, so we have expanded tabs, great, selected tab quest. All of this looks great. We have a version 3.0, awesome. However, we can see quest deed. Hopefully this is going to change when I load up the current one. So quest 1879, but it ends in 246. This one ends in 321. We can even come in and say, hey, is there a 246 in here? Great number. And it should end in 321. We can see that that conversion took place. Awesome. Oh, that's funny. My chatty just disconnected and reconnected. Well, hopefully that's not a bad sign. Okay, so and Brad says, geese are never innocent. I'll tell you, geese do not seem like they were evolved to deal with contemporary human society. I think there's a lot of stuff that goes on that just makes them mad. Like shiny cars or just big geese that they have to fight. And you know, if we didn't have shiny cars, then I don't think the geese would fight. We've been walking outside in the lovely weather, and of course, all the ducks around here have little fluffy baby ducks. They're older than baby ducks now. Like they're almost adult-looking ducks, except they're still very fluffy looking. And numerous times it's been, well, those birds are like less than 30 feet away from us, and they've got a youth to protect, and I sure hope they don't see us as a threat as we go walking by casually, because that would be annoying. And so far, they've been very calm about it, but I don't know how much of that was us not looking like, terrifying versions of a duck, and how much of that was just there have been around humans for a long time around us. But it was in my head, like, what do I do if that duck starts charging me, like a goose might? And the answer is, I'm not sure. I mean, I think I can take a duck, but I think it could do some damage, because duck teeth are pretty terrifying looking. Okay, so we've found a couple of problems here, but currently this is looking pretty good. So what we want to do is step it up. We've got a minimal test that is now working. Let's go back up to all 14 of those files and see what happens. Little Red Head says, if the duck starts charging, you take away its credit card. But Everybody says, forgive me, I speak from childhood trauma of exactly that. No goslings involved, and the bounder stuck up on me and attacked. Yeah, like, something about human body language, I think sometimes geese do not like it. Alright, so we've got the full version 2.0s that we're going to bring in. I've copied in all 14 plus the core file that references each of them. And we're just going to go ahead and load. And again, this is going to take maybe a second for each file, so it can take a little while to process 14 of them. But we have done so, so let's scroll on up into our chat log here. So upgrading save file format from 2 to 3 for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, all the way to 11. A couple updates, 12, 13, 14. Cool, no problems there. Processing 3 to 3.1 for character 1. Replacing deed, 2, 3, replacing deed, 4, 5, 6. Now, this is really important because this correlates with the notes we made earlier. In fact, I probably made them poorly. All right, so, but we can see character 1, awesome, replaced a deed, and that's the only one for 6. 3, 6, 10, 12, and 14 should all have the same notice. So 1, 2, 5, 3, 1, 2, 5, 3, 1, 2, 5, 3, 1, 2, 5, 3, 1, 2, 5, 3. So 12 and 14, great. And then 7 should be 11 and 14. Those should be, again, different. So, so character 11, there's actually 2 going on here. That's awesome. And 14, we have 5473. We have that 5473 over here as well. Awesome. So we're seeing a one-to-one correspondence, more or less, with the correct updates in place of the could not find the thing updates. We have a little debug output here, and then we're good. So if we unload these, first thing, we should see just one update per plugin file. It's great. And every one of these .plugin files, we should see small. Generally much smaller than 100 kilobytes. We can see whatever their character 14 was, they are doing heavy-duty job on completing deeds. That's awesome. Let's see, 2, 1. For characters that are basically unplayed, your plugin data file should be really tiny now. It goes down from being 1/3 of a meg to basically empty. So this character had 1 deed, awesome, no conflicting quests, no expanded tabs, 1 deed that they haven't cleared out of their recently completed list, and some basic information. All of that doesn't take very much. Whereas that character 14, if you go look at the deeds, they have completed 1,134. Good job, person. A player after my own heart. I'm a big fan of deed completion, where reasonable and possible. Okay, so let's circle back around. Could not find corresponding quest ID for deed ID 5. We saw that was because instead of keeping the updated information in memory and working in that, we were replacing it with a file that didn't exist. And because we were writing out backup files, we were just loading in that version 2 file repeatedly and trying to work on it. So that's not great. So some save files have a mix of old and new deed styles. We can see what's going on. There was enough of a success, it would seem, that they were able to go out and complete some deeds, even though they were running on a messed up save file. What I'm going to do for this person, as an apology, is probably take whatever new information and merge it into these correctly updated files. But going forward, hopefully this won't be a problem. Okay, so could not find corresponding quest. I think we're good with that. We're good with that. Is it safe to modify a table we asked to write out to file between when we asked it? That's an interesting question, but I think we're seeing the answer is yes. We are flushing these things out as backup files, and the backup files are being different, or arriving different. Let's go check that out. If we compare the version 2 to the version 3, we will see a lot different. For instance, the version 3 backup is correct now, and the version 2 backup is what it should be. Okay, cool. So even though we're writing the same in-memory thing out, it is working. What I'm hoping is you ask LOTRO to go ahead and serialize this file, and it does serialize this file, but it doesn't actually put it onto the drive anywhere, so that it is immediately ripping the information it needs and copying it off somewhere, or putting it into memory as what it will write out, or maybe even writing it out somewhere else and just moving it here after 5 or 10 seconds. However, that's going to work. But the important thing is that question I think is answered. Hello, Goose. Okay. Seems like yes. And that makes sense as well. Like, that's how you would want it to be. Even if there's a delay in hitting well, I wanted to say hitting the platter, but nowadays that's not mostly true. Even if there's a delay between you asking it for it to be written out and it actually hitting the disk, you still would like it to be a consistent write. So write exactly what it was that I said to write when I said to write it, even if it is delayed by 5 or 10 seconds. Okay. So that being said, let's take a look at what changes we've made. And there might be some leftover ones because I was playing around with some other fixes recently. And see if we can't do something about this. Okay, I'd like to resize this, please. All right. Okay, so we have a VS Code file. I'm going to blow that away. It wasn't working the way I wanted it to. All right, we have a prior save formats update. Looks like that's just a version 3.0. So we're just going to go ahead and commit that. We've got some to-do items here. Okay. Awesome. There's a couple of other things here. So version that we're going to commit that. Great. Are all the changes in this file the ones we want? Let's take a look at that while I get a drink. All right. What do we have here? All right, I'm going to make this bigger so we can see this. I needed to shorten the backup file name that was being used because we were creating a save file with more than 64 characters in it, which LOTRO doesn't let you do, for reasonable reasons, I suppose. And so, since the name was changing in both places, in the log file and in the variable name, it made sense to go ahead and use that variable over here. So this is a different problem. So let's go ahead and start segmenting out our commits. And in fact, let's make a let's come on over into our README so we can start making a version 3.0.5 changes. Bugs. Fixed an issue where the character save file name could be too long. Awesome. Next, let's go ahead and actually commit those changes. So this one right here, this is part of that. We're going to stage that. And we're going to stage that README as well. Okay, where else? Not that. This one, yes, we can see we're doing, instead of backup, we're doing back. I'm hoping that's enough. Did I do anything else? I think I might have shrunk down the now string a little bit. I hope. I'll have to revisit that. All right, this is more good change. This is a change for a different issue, so we're going to hang on. We've got another backup here. That's line 281. So that's the local file name. What were we getting rid of here? Oh, I see. I had minor differences off. That's going to be a problem. What we would like is I'm going to go ahead and remove that white space change for a minute. What is going on here? So format update. That was line 273. There we go. Okay. So what we want to do is take that one and take 281 and then come look in here and see how that worked. And the answer is it did not. We'll need to do that a little bit differently. Okay. So to isolate that change a little bit, I'm going to go ahead and do 1, 2, 3, but then immediately undo them so I have them in my history here, because I don't want to lose them and that would be sad. This is not a great way to do it, but it does kind of smooth the way for this right here, where now the fork comparison can find a very specific issue to do. So we're going to go ahead and fix an issue where the character file saved name could be too long. Awesome. We're going to commit that and then get our changes back. And so what that hopefully does is allows us to separate out the file save name that has back in it, as it did in the old one. And so the white space change is going to be different from the concrete change of the file name. Okay, so we can go ahead and close this out and then reopen this. And now we just have other changes that we haven't accounted for yet. So, all right, I say I'm doing something, but then I don't do the thing. We should have a test for this before we commit it. That's fine. And then in the old version, we were checking for care data, care name, if that's not nil, and the quest is not nil. But I think it looks like I just removed the check for the character name because we already have it in memory because we've loaded it. That seems fine. Doesn't seem necessary, but it seems fine. Okay, so that's a change there. Okay, so let's go ahead and do our snapshot of the changes for file formats. Starting with, let's document it in our README file, fixed an issue with upgrading the file format through multiple versions in one session, e.g. from version 2.0 to through version 3.0. Okay, 3.0 and then 3.1. Loki says, fix FPS drops. I have to say, I'm not sure what FPS drops you're referring to specifically, but when I'm looking at my frame rate here, it's 90 plus, and I can't remember if I told it to limit it or not. I might have told it to limit it to 90 as an experiment. Let's see, maximum frame rate. I did not. Okay. So while streaming and recording that stream to hard drive and all the other stuff going on the side here, I'm getting 90 frames per second. And admittedly, I'm not stressing that too much. If I'm running around over here, I'm getting 60 frames per second. But it is quite normal on this machine when I'm not streaming and saving that stream to hard drive and sending it off board for that number to be much higher. We can see it jumped up to 150 there. So if you're concerned about your frame rate changing, you might change your maximum frame rate to be something specific. So for instance, dropping it down to a 60 so that you don't get wobbly between whatever you're perfectly happy with and something much higher. I didn't experience this significantly changing how much CPU or GPU the game was using, but your mileage may vary. So, oh yeah, good point. Little Redhead points out, I'm not actually an SSG employee. I just know a little bit about the game. So if you're having technical issues, you could find better feedback perhaps on the forums. But I would say the game itself, I don't get a lot of frame issues during normal play. That is, the rendering stuff on my client is not a problem. Now, there can be things that we call lag for numerous reasons. There can be problems with your computer. Some of us have better equipment than others, and that's perfectly normal. There can be problems between your computer and the servers. There can be problems on the servers, and unfortunately, it's kind of difficult to know what it is. So it's very nice when we get a chance to play on EU servers or American servers, and we're on voice chat with people. It's, you'll hear people, oh, I'm lagged out a little bit or whatever, and it's simultaneous with your experience. Cool. You're coming from completely different directions to talk to that server. It's probably a server issue. Whereas, sometimes we'll have an issue and it's just us and everyone else is fine, and we're frozen in midair jumping or something. And when everyone else is fine and we're not fine, then it's it's between us and the server, or it's on our machine, but it's probably not a server-wide thing because it's not affecting anyone else around us. So without kind of being able to have other people key you into where the problem is, it can be hard to figure out what is the cause of this performance issue. And it's certainly true that they have had issues on the LOTRO servers, and they will continue to work on it to make it better. But yeah, like the game will occasionally have performance issues due to the number of people connected, and I hope they continue to have success addressing those issues. But that being said, Aaron Bart says, what hardware should be optimal to reduce issues on one's own machine? I don't have a good answer for that. I do know the game has a, if you go to your graphics, there's a detect optimal settings button. It'll try to balance things out a little bit. But ultimately, if you go to the very low mode and you're still having issues with your frame rate, then it may be that your equipment is a little underpowered for what LOTRO would like to do for it. Right now, my machine is trying to render about 300 frames per second, so that's a sign that my machine can do more. And I'm using, I think, Control F to get that to pop up. It's just a little frames per second diagnostic tool. So at that point, I can say, oh, okay, what about if I go to high settings? What does it look like there? And it's going to churn for a second while it loads textures that weren't loaded and all those things. But we can see, oh, okay, we're still in the hundreds now that everything's loaded and kind of smoothed out. We're at 120. Okay, I could probably go higher because my eye can't actually distinguish 120 frames per second. So I don't need it to be that high. What if we go to ultra high? So this is kind of a, if you don't like the detect optimal settings button, this is kind of the equivalent of that, where you just keep on ramping up your visual quality until this number starts hitting a value that you don't like. Like, I wouldn't want that to go below 30, maybe below 60 would be a problem, but as long as it's continually above 60, I have no problem putting on ultimate settings, even though as I said, I'm also asking my computer to do a lot of other things. But there's so many variables that go into kind of optimizing your experience on whatever hardware you're working on that it's really difficult to say anything other than, if you're working on a laptop, I've been there, and there's not a lot of changes you can make. You can maybe add some memory, but there's not a lot of swapping out of components. But if you're on a desktop, then you may know that hardware that's 5 or 10 years old is not going to be as good at some modern challenges as hardware that's new or a year or two old. And it's just a trade-off of, do you have the money and do you want to invest it in this area, or do you need to? Do you have a perfectly fine experience in game at the medium level or at the high level? Running on ultra high is, it's a very nice experience if you can do it. I love how Middle Earth looks rendered in LOTRO's ultra high graphics setting, but it's not mandatory to enjoy the game. I've run it on low or medium for years on a laptop because that's what I had. So no shame if that's your situation. You're running on low graphics, because there's a fun game to be had. I've mentioned before, the MMOs, LOTRO is no exception, are a graphical extension of MUDs and mushes that were text-based role-playing systems, MMORPGs that were text-based, right? So they are first and foremost a lot of text, and this is one of the problems why when people say, oh, could the game be localized to Spanish, or in my case, I would love to be localized to Dutch or other languages, the answer is technically yes, but there are like dozens of books worth of text in the game, just in quest text alone, not to mention deeds and flavor text and hoverovers and all these things. And so this is a fancy way to read a book. An interactive book, but it's a fancy way to be a part of a story that is primarily textual. And combat is the most advanced part of the game, where you are interacting in a way that would be very difficult in text. But I've played text games where it's like, hey, it's your turn to do something. What do? I attack. I cast a spell, right? Like, this is an evolution of the form. Thank you, Little Redhead, for answering Aaron Bart's question. Muds and mushes. Aaron Bart also says, how modern is the program of LOTRO with all the updates? It is... it's an interesting question. For years, Microsoft had a font, an adding font dialog. I just looked. I couldn't find it off the top of my head, but for years, possibly it's gone in Windows 10, but had the add fonts dialog was basically the exact same code as it was in Windows 95. Hadn't changed. There was no need for it to change. Most people weren't interacting with it that way. And so you have this code that works, that does what you want it to do, that is 20 years old, and is it modern because it's part of a modern operating system? Like Windows 7 had this thing. Windows 7 was modern at the time. Was that font dialog modern? No. Did it work? Yes. Was there a reason to change it? It looked ugly. Like, I don't know. So Windows 7 could be modern without the font dialog being modern, right? The font dialog was a 20-year holdout that just has never met the bar of we should replace this even though it works, and the only thing wrong with it is it looks ugly. So I have a suspicion, though I don't know the details, that LOTRO is very much the same. I'm sure there are parts of the code base that are 20 years old that have seen minor tweaks for bug fixes, but otherwise are unchanged because if it's not broke, why would you change it? Like, old code isn't necessarily bad code. Obviously, this is a very functional game, even though some parts of it might be very old. On the other hand, I'm sure there's also been parts of that code that have been substantially modified or even rewritten since then, because that's the nature of things. You have a large puzzle of many pieces, and when one piece starts having problems, you don't throw out the whole puzzle, you just replace that one piece. Or some better analogy that's not puzzles, I don't know. So the answer is, how modern is the program LOTRO? I don't know. It is possible that people at SSG don't really know, because you would want some sort of automated tool to try to do comparisons between what it used to be and what it is now, which requires you to have what it used to be and what it is now, and the desire to do the comparison and the time to do the comparison. And I would guess at least one of those things is missing at SSG to do that kind of thing. So it might be that no one really knows what percentage of code is like untouched for 20 years versus brand spanking new. And so this is all just me hypothesizing with no real information. So Little Red has pointed out that a MUD stands for multi-user dimension. Awesome. She says MUDs were very dungeon oriented, while mushes and moos were more social RP style. Ironbird asks, so what's a moo? And Little Redhead has more information. So yeah. I mean, acronyms are great, but ultimately there's been many evolutions of connecting people into a shared world through text and now graphics. And we call LOTRO an MMORPG, massively multiplayer online role-playing game. And we call it that whether or not people are just doing the role-playing part, or if they're going out into instances. Like if you have 20 hobbits in the Green Dragon Inn on a Friday night singing and dancing, that is role playing. Awesome. It's moderately massive and online, but it's maybe not what people think of when they think of an RPG game, where maybe they're thinking more of the combat oriented things. Yeah, I don't know. But we still call it an MMO because we gotta call it something. Okay. Fixed an issue with upgrading the file format through multiple versions in one session, e.g. for version 3.2 through, I like that better, through 3.0 to 3.1. So that's the issue that we are fixing. We're going to go ahead and get that in there. And Brett says, thanks, was just wondering what the acronyms were. I feel like in my history, I tend to attach Moo to online classes. And I don't know if that's a fair thing to do. It's just what's in my brain. All right. Fix an issue with upgrading file for multiple versions in one session. Great. Let's come on into here. This is part of it. We know that. What's going on here? Okay, there's two things here. I want to get rid of just this for a minute. And again, we're going to roll that back here. Heard another horse. I think that's the goose. Okay, that's going to be harder. What's going on here in the code? In the code here, we need to go ahead and delete that, delete this, and outdent this in order to get what we need here. Okay, that allows us to come on in here and stage that and stage this. So the actual changes are pretty minimal, right? Don't overwrite what we just did. Don't overwrite what we just did. Save out what we just did. Fantastic. We should actually double check that this patch data save is ever we need it to be. But let's go ahead and first commit these files, and then come back in and save this change here as well. Let's look for that patch data save. So we have a backup file. LOTRO Head says, muds, mushes, moos, we're talking 1990s. So that means a lot of people's memories and cobbled together history and online searches. Yeah. There's a joke sometimes about, telling stories to children about how it used to be in the days of dial-up and them not believing you. And, there may be some of that. I don't have any children of an age to wow with my stories of a modem, but it's certainly a different era. All right, save it back up with the 2.0 file, save the 3.0 file. Actually, I'm not convinced that this is correct. There might have been a reason for it to not be there. Hang on. Okay, so the first patch data save is saving a version 1 backup. Awesome. And then creating individual save files. That's fine. It's a whole thing. Save a backup of 2. Save the 3.0. Okay, because the broken apart versions were the 2.0. So that was getting saved, yeah. So 3 and now 3.1. Okay, I'm comfortable with that. I think it's a little redundant in the sense that, no, it does need to be there. We're going to be asking for to write something and then write on top of it, and I'm going to trust that LOTRO can sort that out. Okay, cool. So let's load up our diff again now that we've removed more things. And we're just down to this one thing, 2 things. This one here, which has both the indent and the removal of the char does not equal nil. Now, why are we getting rid of that not equal nil? Now, I would imagine it's because I thought it wasn't necessary. So what's going on here to make me think it's not necessary? Okay. That's what it was. I hoisted out the check for nil ahead of here, because if it's nil here, then this is going to fail, and this is going to fail. And so it needed to be higher. Okay, that makes sense. So these 2 changes together, where'd it go? There we go. Trying not to put too much text under my face. Okay, so these 2 changes together, this is deleted because we are hoisting it out to here, and therefore everything in here is protected. I think what was happening is I had a case where the care data was missing. Someone had done the unthinkable to me. They had deleted some of their characters so that they could free up character slots so they could make more characters. Makes my skin crawl. Delete a character, but to each their own. And so we were attempting to access character care name, quests, and character version, and the whole thing was it was crashing at that point because that was a null reference. So by hoisting this checkout, to here, we protect everything here, and also we no longer need it here. I'm good with that change. The only thing I'm not sure is why we are not setting the thing to nil. So what I want to do is find if we thought maybe that was happening somewhere else. Aaron says, it's boggling how much has changed in a single generation of human history. Yeah, sometimes when I watch a television show set in the 90s and the hoops they have to jump through to get to information that we have available to fingertips using modern smartphones as they were once branded, but it feels like that's kind of fallen out to just like it's a telephone. But the amount of, I'll just look that up real fast that we can do, that late 90s even would have just been like, no, you write it down and look it up later, or you just don't know. It's a different world. But in a sense of faster access, like it's not like you could not learn the things, but yeah, like do you have a pen and paper with you? Great, write it down. Tonight, maybe tomorrow, you'll look up the information and then you'll have the information. So you have a bit of wonder that maybe you don't have anymore because like the wonder is replaced with, let me look, okay, cool, answer. I don't know if one's necessarily better than the other, but one is definitely faster than the other. Okay, so we have numerous uses of this character's care data. And Amber says, I'm told there's more tech in people's pocket now than launched the lunar lander. It definitely depends on how you're measuring. Like by kilogram, there's more in the lunar lander. But in terms of processing power, yes, that is true. Okay, I'm looking at update data, replaces care data characters with get alt names. Get alt names iterates through this, and for each one, if the item is not null, then we insert it into the alts. And so I think we don't do that because it's already being done. So let's do an experiment with that. And gotta back out to here. So what we want to do is, you know what, I'm just going to go ahead and delete most of these things and come on into here. Alright, so we have character 1. Oh, actually, I don't even need to worry about that. Okay, so we have all of our characters here. We only have Affidel in character 1. So why did I close it? I don't know. Let's go back to the plugin manager and load deed tracker. Ideally, there should be no problem here. Fantastic. We have Affidel and Care 1, and we're going to go ahead and unload. And what we can see is Affidel and Care 1 get written out, and nothing else does. So this is fine. It's already taken care of. We don't need to replicate the logic again. So in that sense, done. We have a debug statement. That character data file is missing, removing from index file. Cool. No one's going to see it if they don't have, but we should have seen it. Did we see it? No. Oh, of course, that is during an update. Fair enough. Let's do an update. So we're unloaded, so that's fine. We're going to go ahead and delete that. Close this. Yes, that's fine. We're going to go ahead and bring in the anonymized. That's great. Except, you know what? Only one is going to be there. So the rest of them, not there. Okay. So let's go ahead and load dtracker. Interesting. We've created empty files for all of them. I don't know if I like that behavior. But I know what the problem was. I was starting from 2, and that check is in 3. No, that is version 2 to version 3. What's going on here? What's going on in load car data? What's going on? Okay, so version 2, we got a return nil. For version 3, that upgraded to an empty file. And finally in version 3.1, it's still empty. Is that better than just deleting it? Okay, and let's check to see if it's nil, just for kicks. All right, we've unloaded. We're going to go ahead and copy in just these two and load. Whoops, wrong key. Unload, and we're going to come back in here. That did not work. That's why we can roll these things back. Okay. That was in main.lua. We're going to go ahead and undo that. Let's look at this other main while we're in here. 273. Nope, 273. There we go. Oh, of course, the update data is the one that's doing that. Okay, that's why I keep on dumping this out. I feel like I'm overthinking this, but then again, I got into this problem by not overthinking this, or in fact, underthinking this. So, what's going on for this check here? This is version 2 to version 3. Okay. Load care data. So at this point, the care name, debug loaded data for car name is, and we're going to go ahead and dump that and put a trailing quote on it. Okay. It's unloaded. Great. We're going to come into all characters, blow it away, and again, just copy in those two files. Coming back in, loading this, we should see some extra output. Holy moly. Okay. That's not good. Oh no, that is fine for car 01. Oops. Can't do that. Oh, I mean, you can, but you'll blow your chat limits out. Okay, so if car name is not equal to car1, then please dump that out. Whoops. Oh, it's got affidel too, doesn't it? Well, we'll see. Okay, so we can see loaded data for character 2 is nil, 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 nil. So we've got the ability to look for that here. It's an awful lot of code to indent. But it would look like, here, let's scroll on down past all of this. It would look a lot like this one. So if car name equals nil, then that's missing remove from file else. All of this, and then an end. So that's what it would look like. Let's see how it would act. Okay. Processing for car2. car2 data's file, removing from index file. car6's data file is missing, removing all the way on down. Awesome. We can see the characters only have affidel in car1. Unload. And everything has been stripped out. And at that point, if we pull in the main file, we can see just affidel and character 1. Okay. So that's working. Do we want it to? And if we do, it really feels like we need to do an indent all the way over there. Okay. Let's take a look at what this, well, we're going to need to make another change. Okay, so all of this needs to get indented once. And I'm not a huge fan of really indented functions. It's a sign that you should probably be splitting out your code into sub-functions. Like, hey, everything in here should be something. And this is reaching the point where it should probably be. But refactoring code into a function has its own complications. So we're going to pause on that. But really, if the version is 2.0, then call a function, to handle that. And for each character, call a function to handle that would be a completely reasonable change to make. Probably not today. Break apart update function into sub functions for each version and per character for each version. That's a later problem, is what that is. Okay, so with a reasonable file comparison utility, you can ask to ignore all the white space changes. White space is just the term given for things like space, enter, new line, and any non-printing characters. Tabs, spaces and tabs are the big ones, though. And so we can see down below, dots are spaces in this way of looking at it, and a hyphen would be a tab. So you can visualize the white space by making it not hidden. And you can also ask a proper file comparison utility to just ignore white space. And if you do that, that's very handy for when you're indenting and outdenting code. You can just say, show me the things that aren't that. And we can see, cool, we have our if here, and we have an extra end at the end, although nominally that would be there, and this would be there, and that's where our end would go. That's a manual alignment that you can do with a comparison. And we have another one here, if this, else, and end. And here's where we remove that nil check. All of that is good. So these are the fundamental changes that we're talking about. But when you include white space, the whole file's changed, which is aggravating. But that's why we try to isolate our snapshots, our commits, to just what is related to a specific objective. In this case, we are checking for the existence of data before acting on it. And the majority of that is just white space changes with a couple of if statements. But naively, it looks like we've changed the whole file. So it goes. Okay, so readme fixed an issue where deleted characters were, characters in the main file without data files were getting processed during an upgrade, during a file upgrade. Okay, cool. So we've got this as what did we try to do? I'll just use that as my commit subject because I'm lazy. In the save format update, we've already compared this. We can always do it again. Let's pop that open. Minors, we see if else end, and a lopping off, removing a check that got hoisted. Everything else is white space, and okay, it's a lot to look at. This is why it really helps to have a dedicated tool for comparisons, because this is going to say, hey, you've changed a lot. And they've been incorporating new features, so I'm pleased to see that Fork now has the ability to ignore white space. Awesome. We can see the exact same things here. But that white space is still going to show up in the underlying tools because we are changing them. Let's see. Show hidden symbols. Nice. You can see the difference between spaces and tabs. Love it. These are newer, and I'm very glad to see them. Word wrap. Ugh. Fantastic. So glad to see that they're incorporating those. I'm still very fond of Beyond Compare, and I still open it up because I'm very used to it. But the Fork really got its start as a very sleek product on top of Git. It was very feature light, it felt like. And the more and more features they add, the more it's going to creep towards all those bloated feeling other softwares that they were competing with. But that's also the nature of software. All right, we're going to go ahead and add that. We'll go ahead and grab those to-do items while we're doing a chain. We'll do that later. Okay. Okay, set region expanded. We'll do that in a moment. Awesome. We'll go ahead and commit this. What's going on in plugin functions? This was a related action. So if character data was working, then we would just copy it off. But this is where we go ahead and only copy that off if the data exists. Awesome. What function was that? All right. Updated get alt name to only include characters who have data. Cool. We're going to commit that. We'll grab those to-do file changes. Okay. This extra check feels unnecessary, especially with the changes that we've just done. I'm a little hesitant to remove it because I did see that problem. But now that we're fixing issues of having nil data, it's no harm. It's one extra check. But I'm going to document that I'm wishy-washy on this. And to do this, I'm just going to go ahead and open that up. We can see it's on line 100. Great, pop there. I think this check is no longer necessary since we are doing better at not including characters without data, but I'm not ready to do the testing needed to remove it. Cool. A year from now, 5 years from now, someone can look at it and say, yeah, we don't need that. But yeah, we're just gonna leave it. Added nil will check to set region expanded. Awesome. The last thing that's on the list, we have these two items. Load care data was the wrong place to set the file version. Oops. So we definitely want to include that in the README. Fixed an issue where backup files were getting the current version set. No, that's terrible wording. Diana asks, is there any kind of testing library that could help with these kind of regression fears? What a great question. So I'm a big fan of unit testing, but the code that we are writing in LOTRO plugins currently uses LOTRO APIs to make things happen. And I have theorized and sort of plotted out in my head what it would look like to fake out a plugin, to have a mock UI in which a plugin can say, hey, what size is the screen? I'd like to load this file. I'd like to save this file, and have an environment in which you could develop a plugin without LOTRO running. And for a lot of things, a lot of basic things like making a window, moving a window, loading a file, saving a file, these basic things, super easy, right? Okay. That's an exaggeration. Super doable. That's the one I want to say. For other things like, here's an effect on a character, here's what's in your backpack, here's all of this stuff. Harder, but probably possible, to reverse engineer some of those things. But it's a lot of work to create that kind of environment. And the other half of it is regression testing on user interfaces feels exponentially harder than regression testing on algorithmic code, right? If you have a function that you call with these parameters and it should return these results, and you can kind of write unit tests to test it, that's very repeatable. That's very easy to do. It's harder to say, hey, what happens if here, let me load this up. What happens if we change characters to someone else and then change the tab and then expand this thing and then unload the plugin? That's doable in a sandboxed environment, but that's really hard to do within within LOTRO or any game because you have to interact with the game to make that happen. So you could have some sort of automated testing suite that was like, click on the load button, click on the D tracker, then click on the load tracker, and then wait half a second, and then come over to this pixel and click that. Like, these are things that you can do in software testing. But it gets harder when you're not just interacting with the program that you're writing, but with another program in which your program is hosted. So Yes. The answer is yes. There are testing libraries that can do interaction with UIs, but that kind of automated clicking and interacting is going to look to a game like LOTRO exactly like someone who's automating gameplay and could be a very nice way to get your account suspended. So I would be interested in doing that in a sandbox environment that's faking out being LOTRO. I'd be a little hesitant doing it with an actual game. I don't know what kind of countermeasures SSG takes against that kind of automation because I don't work for SSG. But assuming they do any, that's the kind of behavior that would be more likely to trip their detections. It could throw up a few flags. Those flags could be red colored. So what a great question. So the answer is yes, but a lot of times testing UIs in an automated ways can be even harder than just getting someone to go and click the things in the UI. And so we do our best as plugin developers because we don't have that sandbox environment. But even if we did, I think it would still be very difficult to write those tests. Not impossible, certainly. I have visions in my head of doing something, but yeah. Anyway, yeah. Okay, Diana's absolutely makes sense. Hit the nail on the head with what I was wondering about what SSG does and doesn't expose for plugin development. Yeah, the specific answer, and if you haven't seen it, I encourage you to check it out. You can find it over on the LOTRO wiki. There's an API that they do publish that tells you what things you can do. And so within the game, as a plugin, you can react to some events and you can send some things to chat. You can make UI elements appear and disappear. But there's a lot you can't do. Plugins can't directly interact with the auction house, for instance. Plugins can't, at the moment, peek inside of carryalls, which is very sad. So plugins can see that items went into a carryall and items came out of a carryall, but plugins can't tell which carryall it went into. And so there's some limitations based off of the information available to us. The deed tracker plugin on the face of it is a tricky one to write because there's no interface that says what deed just happened. Tell me when a deed is completed. All we have is in the chat it says completed, Wolves of Avendom or whatever, and we just say, well, do we know of a deed called Wolves of Avendom? Oh, we do. Okay, cool. That was it. That was probably it. So a slightly more robust API might have a way for us to be informed when a quest is completed or when a deed is completed instead of having to look at chat. Crazy says, do you know why they made plugins not able to interact with the auction house? It seems like, so what comes to mind is back in, let's say 15 years ago, I played World of Warcraft and knew some other people who played World of Warcraft. And as happens when you're friends with software engineers, some of them will be writing plugins. And one of them was writing a plugin that was an auction house interface. I don't think it's one of the major ones today, but at the time it was really nice. You could just say go, and it would just look at every page of the auction house and write down the prices for all the items there. And you could get very accurate pictures of the market prices for things, like a stack of 20 wool cloth or something, or linen cloth. You could automate the whole process. You could even automate and say, hey, take all of the linen in my inventory and post it in stacks of 10 for this much. And you could press go, and it would just go ka-chunk, 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 and post these things. Or please buy out anything that is less than this price. Go, and it would just do that. And on the face of it, that seems neat. But on the other hand, it was neat if you were one of the people running the auction house scraper tool that let you know the average prices of things and buy out super cheap versions of it. It was maybe less neat if you were not one of the people with all that extra information. And so looking at an environment where some games did allow that kind of extensive interaction, I am guessing the people behind LOTRO decided in their free time making a Lua interface to support plugins that they would not be quite as broad as that. Because that kind of defeats the purpose. Like, the point is for people to play the game, and at that point, the computer is playing the game. The auction house game, or minigame. And so the more things plugins can do, maybe the more how you interact with the game changes if you're a user of those plugins. There's a really fascinating video that Dan Olson, Folding Ideas, put out, a video essay about how add-ons have changed how people play World of Warcraft, but also how World of Warcraft is developed. He goes into how there are some really, you might call them essential add-ons that you use in instances in high-level play in World of Warcraft that are taken into an account by the people designing new instances for World of Warcraft. Because if everyone, asterisk, is using plugin X to do an instance, then you want your instances to be engaging for those people, right? And so you design your instances around this, and anyone who's not using that plugin now has a very different experience with the game. And I think, sometimes I wish the LOTRO API was a little bit more extensive and let us do more things, but I definitely appreciate that limitations in what you can offload to a plugin mean that the gameplay experience of someone not using any plugins and someone using every plugin they can is maybe a little bit smaller. And so, yeah, with LOTRO, there's a lot of plugins I love to use, but they're usually about data collection, like Titan Bar, putting information I want at my fingertips. But if I don't have that information, I can still go find it. It just takes a little bit extra. Deed tracker, telling me when I completed deeds and what deeds are still remaining. I could do that with pen and paper or a spreadsheet. It would just take longer. So offloading those information retrievals makes a lot of sense. Even something silly like the opaque quest tracker, where you just put a dark box underneath the quest objectives area because it's hard to read for some people. Like, that's an accessibility thing, and I love it. But, plugins that tell you how to play the game, they're for someone, definitely. But, I don't know. It's more complicated than just like, oh, they just didn't want to, right? There's a whole conversation to be had about what's appropriate and what's reasonable and how that encourages different styles of gameplay. Anyway. Let's see. Yeah, Little Redhead says, feels to me that the 48-hour listing is too short. That's more an issue. Yeah, absolutely. I would love a 7-day listing option for the LOTRO auction house, because if I post something on a weekend, only people who play on a weekend are going to see it, regardless of any plugins at play. Or if I post it on a Monday, then anyone who plays on a weekend is not going to see it. So if I could pay the comparative extra amount and have things be a 1-week listing, neat. I'd like that. Maybe you don't want your auction house flooded with things, so maybe say you have to have a buyout amount if you put it up for a week, not just a bid amount. But yeah. Crazy Blackhawk says, I'd love to be able to hover over items in my bag to show the market price. Yeah, exactly. That is the kind of thing you could do with auction house scraping. Crazy says, if they won't let plugins interface, I wish they would update the UI to something more usable. It's funny, the auction house seems very comparable to what I remember the World of Warcraft auction house being back when I played it. But yeah, there are some quality of life things that I also have a mental list of, I wish they would do X, Y, and Z. So yeah, I hear you. Little Redhead points out, I don't have any direct line to the folks at SSG for this kind of thing. So if you have ideas of, I think the auction house would be really much more usable if X, Y, and Z changes happened, that's a great thing to put on the forums. It's not an immediate solution, but someone somewhere on their very long to-do list probably has a look at the auction house and tweak it, and it wouldn't hurt for them to have specific ideas when that thing comes due. Okay. Neat. So, thanks. Great questions in chat. Thank you. Fix an issue where backup files were getting the current version set. I don't like how that's worded at all. Fix an issue where the wrong version number was added to backup files. Yeah, sure. Let's do that. And so we are moving that out of the load car data. And we were putting it in here. And this other one here, we do not want. So we're going to go ahead and kill that debug line. Come back in, excuse me. All right, I was super interested in getting this bug fix done, but I have run over. My apologies. All right, fixed an issue where the wrong version number was added to backup files. We're going to go ahead and steal that commit message. We're going to come in and remove it from that function and put it into this function. Okay, and then force characters to only contain characters with data. Oh my goodness, so many changes. That's 9 different commits today. Love it. It's been 20 days since my last commit, so it was due. And I'm not going to bother to do this on stream, but I think I'm going to be pushing this out in the very near future because some of these changes were just not good. I don't know if inexcusable is the right word, because of course I can excuse them, but not good. So that's going to get pushed out tonight or tomorrow, and then for that person whose files were messed up, I'm going to be hand massaging them a bit and sending them back to them so they can just drop them in. If you, watching the stream now or later, did have a problem with the 3.0 to 3.1 update, shoot me an email. My contact information is in the dtracker description. You can see it is lotrodtracker@gmail.com. We'll try to get you sorted out. But hopefully this was just a person who had left off updating a little bit too long, triggered this set of issues, and most people are either frequent updaters or never update. And either one, they'll have missed this one until I get it fixed. Awesome. Well, we're rapidly coming up on the end of the stream, so if you have any last minute questions, comments, or concerns, let's go ahead and get those into chat. And then if we don't have time for them today, I hope you'll come back and ask them next week. I'm going to grab another drink of water because my throat is starting to say, hey. Diana asks, any recs for learning Lua? So, yes. Let me go ahead and grab a link here. So, first of all, there is a reference manual, Lua reference, Lua 5.1 reference manual. But I don't know that looking at that is going to be the right way to learn Lua for a lot of people. Certainly some people will really have a great time just reading a reference manual, but for me this is I know I can do this thing, but I don't know how to do it in Lua, let's go look. So if you already have prior programming experience, this and places like Stack Overflow will be a good way to kind of say, okay, how do I do the thing I want to do, but in Lua? If you're not used to programming at all, Lua is a pretty friendly language to learn, but it's a different enough language. It's meant to be a scripting language or an embedded language or a language that does specific things. And so if you have a long-term goal of learning how to make real programs, Lua might not quite get you there. But the ideas you use in making a LOTRO plugin are usable in other places. You'll just have to change them up as you go to other languages a little bit. So there's a reference manual there. There's also, if you're looking at Lua for LOTRO APIs, or World of Warcraft or any other game, Factorio, that uses Lua, then you'll need the API reference for that game or that thing that you're doing. So the LOTRO API reference is hosted over the wiki. It's also available in a downloadable form, which I like to use. Mostly just because I'm more used to it in that form. But they both work. So the one I use just looks like this. It's in a pretty standard hierarchical format on the left. And then you click things and you see the view on the right. It's a pretty old system for doing docs like this. The web version has the same information. Sometimes it has a little bit more information, actually. But it's a little bit less of a show everything on the left kind of thing. Hey, Raiders from the Green Eye Gamer, hello! You have once again raided me as we're doing a bit of a wrap-up, but that's okay. I was just answering a question for how do you learn Lua, and the answer is, well, it can vary based on what your experience is. So yes, we have the Lua reference manual, we have the LOTRO API reference, but ultimately I think, depending on who you are, you might get just as much out of looking at a plugin that you like and think, oh, this would be great, except just a tiny change. Like, wouldn't it be great if DTracker, instead of saying DTracker at the top said, my cool plugin? What would it take to make that small change? And then sort of looking at the code to see, can I figure this out? Can I make a small change and figure out what the result is in the game? I think plugins, just like all sorts of other crafting, like knitting or crochet or chainmail or all sorts of things, the hardest part is starting from scratch. I almost never start from scratch when I'm writing a new plugin. I will take an existing plugin that does something similar as much as I can, even if it's just like making a window on the screen or making your settings that go into a save file. There's no reason to write that all from scratch. So once you have these things working, so often you take an existing one and you start modifying it. That's what happened with the DTracker. There's a plugin, the Hitbolt Companion, something like that. And the UI for this and that are remarkably similar for a reason. And so, oh, Diana, you were wondering if you could find the DTracker repo online. The repo itself is a private GitHub repo for now. I've been thinking about just making it public so like the issues could be tracked there and whatnot. I just haven't gotten to it. But you will be able to just download the code from LOTRO interface. All LOTRO, oops, that's not the one that I wanted. All LOTRO plugins are human readable files. So if you were to go over to LOTRO interface and search for DTracker and download it, what you get is a zip file full of hopefully human readable, human understandable files. So if you come in, you're going to find Lua files. These are just text files. You're going to find resources. These are image files in a TGA format. And you're going to be able to open them up and see what's going on. Now, DTracker is a bit of a large plugin, but if you wanted to start small, one of my other ones I would suggest is the Opaque Quest Tracker. The whole point of this thing is to put a dark box under your quest area. And so as far as such things, it's kind of a minimum version of a plugin. It has settings, so it has to keep track of settings and save them and load them. It has a window it draws on the screen, but that's pretty much it, right? It gets a little bit more complicated when you get to version 103 because we add a little lockbox that lets you unlock the window and drag it around and such. But, I mean, really, it's the basics. Having some options, having a window on the screen. Oh, there we go. Having a little lock icon if you want to be able to unlock and move and resize it and relock it. But that's it. So that might be a really a gentler introduction. A gentler introduction to what are kind of the basics for a plugin. So, a basic plugin for seeing code. Let's put that into chat there. Thurlor says, leave GitHub and join the SVN master race on LOTRO interface. I decline. I'm too used to using GitHub for my repos. I don't think moving them over to LOTRO interface would really work with the way my mental model for this works. So, Diana, yeah, feel free to look at the DTracker plugin, of course, but it seems unnecessarily complicated to me, and I'm the person who wrote it. So if I go into dtracker, these are all the code files. All of these Lua files are there. Then there's all the data files for the different languages and all the deeds and quests and whatnot. And then we have files just for handling updating from prior save file formats. All the images are pretty understandable, but there's a lot there. So compare that to the opaque quest tracker, which has 4 Lua files, 5 if you count the Vindar patch, which is a very useful library, and that's it. One image. So that would be a place that I would recommend starting. Opaque quest tracker.lua. In fact, we can open this up here. Opaque quest tracker.lua. You're going to see some basic stuff. You're going to see, how do we tell LOTRO that we want to use some of the LOTRO API? Cool, that's these imports. You're going to see import of various things. Oh, and I almost forgot. Life Beyond the Shire. Thurlow points out, you can write a plugin with as few as 2 files, a Lua file and a plugin data file. Absolutely. The real question is, what are you trying to do? And sort of real plugins that have things like options and settings files and windows that you can move around. It can help to modularize them a little bit. So I'm going to also put a link here to a series of blog posts I did over at Little Redhead's lifebeyondtheshire.com. My intro series on how to write a plugin. Oh yeah, Thurlar, I read through and didn't correct it. You said .plugin data file, you meant .plugin file. Absolutely. And then, yes, absolutely, there's a seminal work. I got to update my link, actually. So that's got to be, forum old? What's the link to the old forums? Let's see. Let's go to LOTRO interface, where I have fixed this over at dtracker. Okay. Forums-old. Okay. Forums-old.lotro.com. And then what else? /forums/show that. Okay. Really should be correct then. Yes, great. I need to update my link. Thanks for reminding me. Edit. Save. Okay, so there's an excellent thread by Garen over on the forums, writing LOTRO Lua plugins for noobs. I think I've got a saved link to not the start, so I'm going to fix that too. Okay, let's see. Garen's. There's a cat behind me. Excellent. Okay, great. So, Dana, I don't know which one of those resources will be optimal for you, but Garen has a pretty extensive getting started, before you begin, how to do it all. A lot of that will be pretty similar to the write-up I did over at Life Beyond the Shire. And Life Beyond the Shire does have the advantage of having videos to accompany them where we talk about everything. So, for instance, the Plugging Along episode 1, basic user interfaces, there's a whole video where we walk through all of this. And so if you find videos a little bit nicer to interact with than the text, you've got that. I didn't do write-ups for all my videos, but the first 3 of them that were kind of like basic bootstrapping into getting stuff on the screen. So give that a try. Check out Garen. Garen has probably a lot more detail and a lot more information and edge cases and nitty-gritty than I did. So if you're up to that, highly recommended this thread. And cool. Great question. And then, yeah, if you're looking to play around with a live plugin kind of in situ and, move things around, tweak things, try changing things, Opaque Quest Tracker might be a gentle introduction because it's just a couple of files. You're going to see how to import files. You're going to see how to declare variables and how to make stuff appear on the screen, all of this. Neat. Awesome. Hopefully that gets you started. Chime back in a week or two. Let us know how it's going. Oh, great. You have software engineering backgrounds. That's going to make it even better. You love guides when you're starting out, so you have an idea of convention. Cool. Yeah. Speaking of convention, there's a funny sort of a split in the plugin developer community. Not like a rift, just a divergence of how they do it. Whether to do object-oriented programming with the classes or Lua classes, or whether to just do functional programming with no real classes. And it's not like one is better than the other, but certainly they both have their advantages and disadvantages. And Lua does not force you to go either way. Thurlow said they didn't say they were a software engineer. They said they might be. That's true. Close enough. I might be a software engineer too. Some days I hope more so than others. Okay, awesome. Plausible deniability. Love it. All right. I am going to believe that I am rapidly approaching being done with the stream. Hopefully that answered people's questions. I think it's time for dinner. It's probably well past time for dinner, given that it's almost 11 o'clock, but that's okay. Sun has definitely gone down, so neat. What lovely conversations we've been able to have today while fixing some very aggravating bugs. What a great combination. And Rod says, thanks again, always fun. You are welcome. All right. Yep, that's all we're going to cover today. Thank you so much for joining me on this exploration of LOTRO plugins. I will pause for a moment. Thurlar says, what's that slider under Rosenblum's vitals? Excellent question. There is an in-game voice support in LOTRO, and this is how you raise or lower someone's speaker volume, or a mic volume in your ears. I'm not sure why we have it enabled. Voice. All right, voice enabled.
Do you want to mention your Discord server?
Yeah, so I'm guessing Rosenblum has voice enabled checked in their settings, and so therefore I am able to modify their settings. Oh no, I should have that checked. I don't know. That's odd. Anyway, speaking of things that that we learned that we didn't realize were the case, yeah, minstrels have a res ability, out of combat res ability. I just realized in a recent raid that this is an area effect ability that just you don't even have to target anyone. You just do it. But if you do target someone, it's 25 meters around that target will res up to 5 targets, which is bonkers how I did not realize that was the case. Anyway, so yeah, if you're a minstrel player and you try to res people and they're all right next to each other because they all failed because the boss hit them, you don't have to do each one individually. You can just target a group and done. So many times I have not used that correctly. Oh well. Anyway, yeah, so that slider is for controlling the volume of other players. Great question. Thanks. Anyway, yeah, so thanks so much for joining me. Thanks for some great questions. LOTRO is a game with 20 years of development and 15, 16 years of being live, and there are little things to learn all over the place. Anyway, I do hope to see you all here again next week, and until then, keep plugging along. All right, bye-bye now.